into a struggle with police and they're on drugs, then, you know, maybe that's...
Rephrase, counsel. Too much of my...
Okay. Do you think that you would have an opinion, one way or the other, about if drug use in any way affected or was involved in this situation?
It would be an element of the situation, what happened and why it happened. It would be a pertinent piece of information. I wouldn't outright make a decision on it as far as, well, that's the final answer. It would be that's a piece of the pertinent information.
And just with your own understanding of drugs, what about that do you think would make it pertinent?
What would make it pertinent is the action of the person, as far as I'm basing this on not a lot of experience in the drug world, but does the person who has been taking drugs, are they coherent? Are they in a position to are they doing what they are intending to do, or are they somewhere else? These things I'm not an expert on, so I don't really know.
So we've talked a little bit about Netflix and network television. Do you watch crime shows on TV?
Some there. Again, this networks, in my opinion, networks are not going to like me at all, but they drowned us in them. It was NCIS every day and this and that and all the rest, and we got tired of them, so we turned our dial, and we don't watch crime shows very often, no.
What about true crime shows, documentaries?
I like historical shows like on TPT, you know, tell me about the true story of Billy the Kid, and I will watch it, and I that sort of thing. But could you come into my house and actually see a crime show on TV? It's possible, but it wouldn't be a routine at all.
So your nephew... Oh.
Time to take a morning break. So we're going to have you return to the courtroom with the deputy, and at the same time, we'll have you back at 5 minutes to 11.
Okay.
So we are on recess until 10:55. I can see counsel in chambers. Welcome back.
Thank you.
We'll resume with questioning by the state. Mr. Swisher, if you would.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, I'll give you a minute to get set up here.
We're good. Thanks.
Fair to say that you have a fairly high degree of trust in the police.
Yes.
And you have a nephew who is a deputy, is that right?
Yes.
But you say he likes to talk more about farming than he does about being a deputy?
He's his life work is farming, but he also is a deputy.
All right. I need to ask you then is, if you were to serve as a juror on this case, the state would call witnesses. Some of those would be law enforcement officers. Some would be bystanders. And if you were to consider the testimony of a bystander versus a law enforcement officer, do you think that the law enforcement officer, given the way you feel, would have a little bit of an advantage with you?
Not really. If they were two people at the same situation giving information as they saw it on both, they're two individuals. What one does for and what one doesn't isn't pertinent.
So if you were then, say, witness A, who is a law enforcement officer, witness B is a bystander, and they both say they see they're there for the exact same event. And witness A says it happens one way, the law enforcement officer says it happens one way, but the bystander says no, it didn't happen that way, something else happened. Do you think that you would tend to believe the officer or the bystander?
Difficult. I'm really not sure. It would depend on who was closer, who was there, who was this, who was that. They couldn't have both been standing exactly side by side and see two totally different things. I wouldn't think. So I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I appreciate your answers to my questions today and for your time this morning, ma'am.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the state will strike the juror.
All right, juror 23, you're excused from service in this case. The deputy will collect some of the matters for you. Also, I'd like to take that.
Okay.
And go with the jury, the deputy, and you are excused from all service. So unless you get another summons in the future.
Thank you.
You bet. And counsel, remind me to talk to you at the break. Just to inform you on some developments outside the courtroom. Okay? Nothing major. All right, we are now up to juror 26. right, good morning.
Good morning.
You are juror 26, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Before I turn things over to the attorneys, I'm going to ask a few questions, but first I'm going to swear you in so that all of your answers are under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm, under penalty of perjury, that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right, thank you. First thing I'm going to ask you about is the questionnaire. First of all, thank you for filling it out and getting it back to us. We appreciate the time you took to do that. Was everything true that you put on the questionnaire?
Yes.
Is there anything that you might want to change or add to? And I say that because sometimes you fill out a questionnaire months ago and you realize, oh, that wasn't really accurate, or I should have added this, I forgot about that. As you sit here right now, is there anything that you'd want to correct?
Not that I can think of. Yeah.
All right. When the attorneys ask you specific questions about specific answers, something might come to your mind.
Sure.
Feel free to give an answer that's different than on your questionnaire because, again, on reflection, things might be different.
Sure.
Okay? Now, the questionnaire also advised you not to read any articles, to avoid the media about information about this case since you are a potential juror. But in the course of life, inadvertently, you might have been exposed to something, a headline, or a friend says, hey, do you know about this? And since you're advised not to tell anybody you're a potential juror, you can't exactly stop them and tell them why. Mm-hmm. Were you, after the questionnaire, exposed to any additional information about the case?
Only through the news when they talk about this is starting to
the trial started.
The trial started. Yeah.
Anything beyond that? Just the dates and the progress of things. Anything about
Not
this?
particularly about the case itself.
Okay. Anything outside the case, but that has substance about the parties, the attorneys?
No.
Okay. All right. And we ask all these questions, as I'm sure you guessed, is because we want to know what you've heard and seen, and you might even formed opinions about it. And that's fine. But when you're a juror, you have to decide the case based on the law and only the evidence that you hear in court. You have to disregard anything you've heard. You have to put aside any opinions you might have formed and decide the case based on just what you hear in the courtroom. Do you think you could do that?
I think so. I'll try my best.
Okay. Did you recognize any witnesses on the list you were given?
No.
All right. Now, the length of trial we estimate is going to be about 4 weeks long once we start, which will be March 29th. So, for example, if you were picked out to be on this jury, you'd be essentially cut loose until March 29th and then be in trial for 4 weeks. Do you think that can work for you?
Should be. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Just a question though. So between
Sure.
now and 29th, is it 29th, I will be.
You're on your own.
my own.
You don't have to report in. You're
Okay.
completely as if you were not on jury service,
Okay.
except for the fact that you can't read or follow any media about the case.
Yeah, yeah. I asked because we were actually planning for some vacation and travel and whatnot. So.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Nelson, but in doing so, just a couple pieces of advice. Make sure you speak close to the microphone so that we can pick you up. If you'd like to take the mask off, that might make it easier to hear you as well,
Okay.
but I'll leave that to your discretion. I'm going to continue to wear a mask,
Okay.
and we have a lot of plexiglass, so
Okay.
that might make it easier. And also, sometimes this examination process can be conversational the way we are in normal life, where we interject with affirmations during the questions,
Yeah.
and then at the end, you might overlap because you know what the question is going to be. Try and avoid that. Try and avoid talking over each other because our court reporter needs to take everything down, and so we need as many pauses as we can get, not talking over each other. Okay? And it's a little bit abnormal to do it because it's not the normal conversational style. So I appreciate your efforts in that regard. So, Mr. Nelson?
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
What? No, I guess good morning. Sorry. It's already been a long day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you some questions, just generally try to get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
And then I want to follow up with some questions about some of the answers you gave in the questionnaire. Okay?
Okay.
I know you may not remember every word you wrote. You may not remember every question that was asked, but I have a copy here and I can help you with that. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So first of all, if you and I were to meet in a social situation, party or some event, what are a couple things about you that you would want me to walk away knowing about you?
If it's about myself, I think I'm hardworking, I'm honest, I'm not too much a party person, put it that way.
All right.
So you may not want to invite me back. What else?
I see.
Yeah, I'm very family oriented.
I see. I was going to say. I see you have 3 daughters,
Yes.
and they're all in their teenage years, or close to.
So 16, 14, and 10. Yeah.
How's that?
How
is it having 3 adolescent daughters?
it's pretty nice. I'm outnumbered. I mean, they're all very nice kids. Yeah, so they're all behaving very well. I love them and they love us. So
Do they get along well?
pretty much, yeah, normal. Siblings.
So, can you think of a situation, whether it be involving your kids or in your professional life, where you've had to resolve conflict between them?
Oh
Between
yes,
2 people?
definitely. Yeah.
How do you go about resolving the conflict as it arises?
Well, if as among my kids, I will be very direct. If I'm on scene and basically watching the whole thing evolve, then I would point them to what's right, what's wrong immediately. Try to get them to understand what should be done and what shouldn't be done. If I'm not there, I didn't see the whole thing happen, I will try to understand what happened before I make any judgment or any decision on the course of action. I think a lot of times, especially for kids, you can reason with them to the nth degree. So you have to put some boundaries out immediately. If the conflict is serious, if not, a lot of times we just verbally kind of talk through the thing and try to resolve that. Professionally, I think I haven't actually experienced anything that I would have to do much to kind of resolve, so to speak. Usually I just have to talk to my my boss and about certain things that I don't see I agreed with or I would support, and we'll talk through those things.
Okay. So turning it, kind of to your daughters. Let's say one of your daughters comes to you and says, "This is what happened," and the other one comes and tells you, "This isn't what happened," and you didn't see what happened. You weren't there. How do you decide which one is telling you the more accurate version of events?
Sometimes based on experience, you can see from their responses, the words they use, or their facial expression, or those kind of things. You can kind of make a call on whether he or she, whether she is speaking off from their heart. Sometimes you just can't figure out. I mean, if the situation is not that bad, I don't think you have to actually find out exactly what happened.
Okay.
At the point.
Well, your job, if you were to be selected as a juror in this case, is essentially to find out what happened.
Mm-hmm.
You have to. You are the judge of the facts of this case.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And there may be evidence in this case that if you look at, one person may come in and say, "This is how you should interpret this evidence," and another person will come in and say, this is how you should interpret this piece of evidence. What tools would you use to reconcile and ultimately decide the facts?
Well, there's certain things I'll do. First of all, I will have to do my due diligence on studying about those evidence myself, based on how I would interpret those evidence. And I think at the jury, the reason why we have a group of people is we can actually use that group of people to help kind of deliberate or bounce back certain ideas or certain interpretations.
So one of the important rules that you have to agree to abide by is that you will only base your decision on the evidence that's presented in court.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you would not be able to go home and study or look up. Would you feel comfortable doing that?
Oh yeah, I mean we in each situation you still have to have limited resources. And in this situation, the limited resources will be, whatever that is presented and available. And if I'm asked to make a decision on what's given, then I will have to work with whatever that is available.
So let me ask you this, sir, is in your personal life, if you were making an important decision, whatever that decision may be, would you describe yourself as kind of an avid researcher? You try to get as much information as is possible, or are you the type of person that can make a decision very easily and don't require much information?
It's pretty situational, but I would say I'm more on the research side of things. Try to get myself educated, so to speak.
Okay. And so if you're asked to make an important decision in your private or personal or professional life, is there some point where you kind of say, I can't make a decision based on the information that's available to me?
Yes.
And if you were to apply that in this particular situation, you understand that the result would have to be a not guilty verdict.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
And are you comfortable with that in a court of law?
Yes.
When you first received your notice to come to jury service, what was your first reaction to that?
Reports and from the news, yeah.
And you have some information about what is alleged to have happened,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm sorry, sir, will I have to use words? Is that a yes?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. When you learned that you would be a potential juror in this case, did your reaction change?
Reaction to
having to serve jury duty?
No.
So, did you have any concern about being a potential juror in this case?
Not particularly about this case. Originally, I was concerned about COVID, other stuff, but timing.
Mm-hmm.
But not particularly about this case.
No particular concerns for your physical safety as a juror in such a high-profile case?
No, not physical. It could be mentally.
Mentally?
Yeah, just because of the high publicity of the case.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit more what you mean by that?
Well, I think originally, when a lot of people was talking, the news was talking about the case, and when I got the questionnaires, thinking about potentially being a jury, then I was kind of a little bit overwhelmed by the news and by the. I mean, at that point, I think during that part of the days, I think it's also closer to the election, and a lot of those discussions and reports are actually linked to my thinking of casting my votes back then. And so that's what I mean by there's those mental kind of challenges and overwhelming happened. After that, it's almost back to normal. I don't think I've done any more research or particularly or intention to look into the case anymore, and just wait for this to happen.
Okay, thanks. You were asked a series of questions in the questionnaire about some general principles of law that apply.
Okay.
And one of the things that you'll ultimately be instructed is that you will be required to follow the law, even if you think the law is wrong or should be different.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand that?
I think I understand it. I agreed with that.
So whatever the rules of law are that the judge instructs us in this case are the rules of law that apply, even if you have an opinion about that the law should be different, essentially. Do you understand?
You are correct. I understand that.
So I would like to ask you a few questions in terms of your questionnaire, if you don't mind.
Okay.
The first question that was asked was what you know about this case, what you read, learned, heard about this case.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming you don't remember verbatim what you wrote. And so there are a few things that you wrote I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
So you write that you recall seeing reports and video clips of the arrest on TV.
Yes.
But I started to, quote, relate, end quote, to the event when the protests became violent and destructive and some of the places familiar to me, and I started to follow the daily news.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain what that means? What do you mean by the word relate? And
I put it into context. I think what I was trying to say is when I read the news about the arrest and I saw the clips, it's still a little bit different, a distance to me until all the protests and also the destruction that happened in Minneapolis. A lot, as I mentioned, a lot of those places I visited before in the past. That I said, well, this case has some consequences, and that actually goes beyond just these few people on the scene, and also to a wider group of people.
okay. Now you indicated also in that answer that after some of the rioting settled down, you drove your family to the scene. Why did you decide to do that?
I think part of it is curiosity. I've lived in Minneapolis Minnesota since 99. I haven't seen such a huge protest and destruction in the neighborhood before. So part of it is curious. I just want to see from my eyes what actually happened to those places, than just seeing those images from TV. And the reason why I drove my family is actually not the whole family, just my wife and one of my daughters around, is to also let them see those places. I don't recall exactly when it happened, but I think during that time our church is also organizing some volunteer work in downtown Minneapolis or south of Minneapolis, that they are collecting food and stuff and whatnot. So I was also thinking of going there and take a look and see if there's anything that I can help. I've heard about people helping people from different parts of the city came aftermath and help, clean up and whatnot. I want myself to see it with my own eyes, as well as want my daughter and my family to see it
And so did you ultimately participate in any of those volunteer efforts that you were describing?
We only did contribute food and supply to our church.
Okay. Now, you also wrote that you think that the media helped politicize the event during the following months as they moved beyond the death of Mr. Floyd. Remember that? What do you mean by that?
I think that's particularly related to all those referencing of the case during the election. I don't recall the details, but I think back then I was under the impression that some people are just using the case to advance their own political agenda or try to promote their own party, or those kind of things.
I also note that you indicated that you had posted some social media posts about your visit to.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
I usually will post photos of me traveling to different places to Facebook, social media, just as a habit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, as the judge just said to you when he was asking you some of the preliminary questions, it's okay that you formed an opinion about these events.
Mm-hmm.
And the question becomes, can you set aside those opinions
Mm-hmm.
and be a fair and impartial juror in this case? Right?
Yeah.
And based on your answers in your questionnaire, it would be fair to say that you had formed a negative opinion of my client prior to coming here today.
Are you asking me a question, or are you just indicating your...
Well, you indicated the question here is, from what you have seen, read, or heard, do you have a general impression of the defendant? That's Mr. Chauvin.
Mm-hmm.
And you checked the box somewhat negative.
Mm-hmm.
So you formed an opinion based upon that information that you had seen and read and your visits to the site, a negative impression of my client.
I think I do have a negative impression of the whole case. I am not sure if I have a negative impression on the defendant personally. Now, I think the issue that I would want to raise, I think I put it in as one of the answers to the questionnaire, is that the negative impression that I had came from the fact, or what I've seen is that there was a civilian died.
Right. In fact, what you wrote is, a civilian died under the watch of a group of policemen, plus the news and social media coverage of the incident caused me to feel negatively
Yes.
about the defendant.
Okay, yep.
Right. And so you understand, again, in those principles of law, Mr. Chauvin is presumed innocent of this offense.
Yes, I do understand that.
And you answered that you could apply that presumption of innocence to him in this case.
I believe so.
But you have formed a negative opinion of it. How do you overcome that?
I'm not sure if I need to overcome that. I think I think through the process, I will have to follow the process, and based on the evidence and be really focused on what is being charged or what should I put it? Yeah, what's being charged, so to speak. I may have an opinion of something that is totally unrelated to the charge itself, and if I have to make the decision on whether or not there's these charges. I'm not sure if I'm using the right word.
That's okay.
Yeah, these charges, then I will have to try to focus on, again, going back to these charges and looking at these evidence, and are they actually leading to one conclusion or the other. Yeah, to your question, I think I will have to try to go back to the charges as much as I can to keep myself focused. If I, yeah.
And you indicated in your questionnaire that you would watch the video 4 to 5 times by your best estimate?
Yes.
And would that be the video? And when we refer to the video, we're talking about this Facebook, social media video that was posted?
I think it's mostly on TV, so news.
Okay. And that was going to be my question is, did you go on the internet and watch the entirety of the video? So the video, when you say you've watched it 4 to 5 times, you've watched little parts of the video that were presented in the news.
In the news, yeah.
So the aftermath, so to speak, the rioting and demonstrations and protests and all of that stuff, you indicated that you thought had both a negative and positive effect on this community.
Uh-huh.
Could
Yes.
you explain that a little more?
I think the negative is definitely the destruction, the loss of properties, and I shouldn't say convenient, but you have stores vandalized and those kind of stuff, and causing the neighborhood a lot of trouble. Those are the negatives. The positives are I saw a lot of people from the neighborhood and from even outside of the neighborhood came and helped, and that shows that people, even if they don't disagree with each other, they still want the better, want the neighborhood to restore and then become better. I think that's how, yeah.
And so ultimately the very next question reads that no matter what you've heard or seen about this case, and no matter what opinions you might have formed, can you put that aside and decide this case only on the evidence you receive in court, follow the law, and decide the case in a fair and impartial manner? That's the question. And your response was, I will try my best, and I think that that's important to ensure a fair trial so that justice can be served.
Yes.
And so ultimately what we need you to be able to say is that not you can try, but that you can do it. Do you understand that?
Yes.
So the question that I have for you is based upon, the opinions that you have formed previously, based upon, going and visiting this site and doing or offering to do some volunteer work and your perspectives on the aftermath, so to speak, can you honestly say, I'm going to put all of this aside and focus only on the evidence in this case?
Yes, I do. And if I may add, some of those things may not directly influence the case itself that I'm in.
Okay. So there's a question then in part 3 of the questionnaire that asks whether you have ever seen the police use more force than was needed. And you checked, looks like you checked yes, crossed it off, checked no, and then you wrote not personally seen, but through news reports on TV.
Yes.
Can you explain, are you referring to this particular case? Are you referring to other cases?
Can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Have you ever personally seen the police use more force than was needed?
Oh, okay. If I recall correctly, I think the first impression that I read that I say yes is because I probably saw something on TV. I have not seen that personally in any case. So.
Okay. But when you in the written response, you say you've seen it on TV, not personally. I think you kind of understood the context.
Yeah.
My question is what you're seeing on TV in reference to this particular case, or is it some other case that you think?
Or some other cases, yeah.
There was a series of questions that asked you to circle your appropriate response from a 1 to a 5, somewhat agree, or very much agree, all the way to strongly disagree. One of the questions was, do police in your community feel safe? And you strongly agreed with that proposition.
Yes.
And you also strongly disagreed with the notion of defunding the police department.
Yes.
And so the next series of questions asked you about both the Black Lives Matter movement as well as the Blue Lives Matter movement. And you wrote that you think all lives matter, you support nonviolent protests against racially related violence against black people. However, I am also aware of other political agendas that are associated with this, which I do not necessarily support. That's what you wrote.
That's probably referring to the election period when some people are.
It was in relation to the Black Lives Matter. That's what you wrote. So how politically do you think that the Black Lives Matter movement was brought into the election stuff? And why would that cause you to disagree with that organization?
I don't think I've formed an opinion of whether I agree with the organization or not. I don't know that there's an organization.
Okay. So I guess I want to make sure that, again, we're like your opinions and your thought process here. You say that you support nonviolent I'm going to back up because I think it's important we put this in the proper context. Okay?
Sure.
The question reads, how favorable or unfavorable are you about Black Lives Matter? You checked a box that said somewhat favorable, and then you wrote, I think all lives matter. I support nonviolent protests against racially related violence against black people. However, I am also aware of other political agendas that are associated with this, which I do not necessarily support.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess my question is, what are the agendas that you don't support and how does that affect your perception of the Black Lives Matter movement?
I think back then it's just a lot of publicity about the term. I don't even recall if back then there's any distinguish difference between a movement and an organization and those kind of things. But I do hear a lot of, I did hear a lot of politicians using the word during their campaign.
Okay. And so you found that to be disfavorable? The fact that politicians...
It's true that I think my impression back then is some people are just taking advantage of that term during their campaign.
Okay.
I think that's what I was trying to say.
Okay. And you had never heard the term Blue Lives Matter before?
Before the survey or questionnaire.
Okay. So in terms of politicians or perhaps advertisements that incorporated the Black Lives Matter into it, I think what I hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you did not like how it became sort of a commercial or to try to gain some advantage. Would that be fair?
During the campaigns, yes.
So my last series of questions, the very last two questions in this questionnaire ask you, do you want to serve as a juror in this case? And you check the box yes. And then it asked you to explain that. And so I guess my question really is, when you write, need to take full advantage of it to bring justice to the situation and so that others can also use this to design policies that will prevent similar things to happen and move on. So do you, when you describe the need for justice in this case, do you automatically ascribe the concept of justice to the state of Minnesota?
Maybe I don't think I've considered that when I wrote that. I'm not sure of what implication.
Well, so justice is somewhat of a nebulous term. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And what justice may mean to me may differ from what it means to you,
Could
at
be.
least in the global sense. Agreed?
Agreed.
But what you're telling us is that you see your service as a potential juror on this as a way to potentially result in policy changes.
No, I don't have. I don't think I have that kind of that. And if I convey that message in that response, then I don't think. Put it that way. The case is the case as I see it now. Is that policy is not decided here. As my understanding is, policy decides somewhere else. So if I am selected as part of the juror, then my duty is as I understood it, is only about this case.
Okay. And you would be correct about that. Again. Now the question becomes, though, is, your position on the matter. And so ultimately, would you agree or disagree that justice could involve a not guilty verdict?
Yes, I agree.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Juror 26, we're going to excuse you from this case. Okay. You are also excused from jury service, so unless you get a summons years from now, you should be just fine.
Okay.
You don't have to report back in. You'll go with the deputy, they'll take some of the paperwork from you, and then you're free to go about your business. And thank you for your candid answers and taking the time to come here and walk through this.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Juror 27. Good morning. You are a new panel that just arrived this morning, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you some initial instructions then. And first, can you all hear me? So I'm going to take my mask off so I'm not muffled. If you cannot hear me or anyone else, we have hearing assistance devices available. But my name is Pete Cahill, and I am one of the judges of the district court, and you have been summoned, as you know, as potential jurors in the case of State of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, which is a criminal case related to the death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. Now, a person charged with a crime has a right to a fair trial before an impartial judge and an impartial jury. In order to make sure that the jurors who are selected are impartial, the law provides that the court and the attorneys for the parties may ask questions to all the prospective jurors, which must be answered under oath. First of all, thank you for filling out the questionnaire that was mailed to you. Your contribution to the important and serious matter at hand is best served by continuing to provide full and complete answers to the questions that you'll be asked today. Those questions will follow up on issues from the questionnaire and possibly other topics. Now, after the questioning is over, the attorneys will have the right to excuse some of you from service on this jury, and I may excuse others of you for what is called cause. In either case, it does not mean that you are not a fair person, and you should not take offense in being excused. I also ask that you not take any offense at any question you might be asked. We must pry, to some extent, in order to explore opinions you might hold and to hear about experiences that you have had that might affect your ability to serve in this case. Now, in this case, the defendant, Mr. Chauvin, has been charged with murder in the second degree and manslaughter in the second degree. But during the normal course of a trial, charges might be added to or subtracted from those charges. But those are the charges as it stands today. To the charges, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which is a denial of each and every material allegation in the charges. And I'm now going to ask the parties to introduce themselves and their clients, beginning with the state of Minnesota.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Swisher. I represent the state of Minnesota.
Hello, my name is Christina Marinakis. I'm assisting with the prosecution.
Hello, my name is Keith Ellison, and I represent the state of Minnesota. I'm Joshua Larson. I also am representing the state. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Nelson.
Hello, my name is Eric Nelson. I'm the attorney for the defendant, Derek Chauvin, along with my assistant, Amy Voss.
Thank you. Now, does anyone know any of the attorneys who have just introduced themselves? All right. Does anybody know anyone else from the Office of the Attorney General, including Aaron Eldridge, Jerry Blackwell, or anyone else who might work for that office? All right. Does anyone? Yes. All right. And you are juror number? 29. Juror 29. We'll have you talk about that when we question you individually. So if we forget, please remind us to follow up on that. Does anyone have any familiarity with anybody from Mr. Nelson's office? Okay. Does anyone on this small panel know anybody else in the courtroom? All right. Now, you've been given a copy of a list of potential witnesses, and I'd ask that you please review it before you are questioned individually, if you have not done so already. And you'll be asked essentially if you know anyone on that list. Now, one of the things that the attorneys may not do in jury selection is to instruct you on the law. But I want you to be aware of some of the basic concepts that apply in all criminal cases so that you may keep them in mind as you answer the court's and the attorney's questions. So I will instruct you as follows. First, the charges against the defendant are not evidence, and they create no inference of guilt. No member of the jury panel should in any way permit himself or herself to be prejudiced against the defendant because a charge has been made against him or because he has been placed on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent of the charges made against him, and in order for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant does not have to prove his innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant throughout the trial, unless and until he has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, according to the law and the evidence admitted at trial. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is such proof as ordinarily prudent men and women would act upon in their most important affairs. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It does not mean a fanciful or capricious doubt, nor does it mean beyond all possibility of doubt. If you serve on this jury, you and your fellow jurors will be the sole judges of whether a witness is to be believed and of the weight to be given their testimony. There are no hard and fast rules to guide you in this respect, but in determining believability and weight of testimony, jurors may take into consideration the witness's interest or lack of interest in the outcome of the case, relationship to the parties, ability and opportunity to know, remember, and relate the facts, manner, age and experience, frankness and sincerity or the lack thereof, the reasonableness or the unreasonableness of their testimony in light of all the other evidence in the case, and any other factors that bear on believability and weight. If on this jury, you should rely on the last analysis upon your own experience, good judgment, and common sense. Now, there are things you should not do during jury selection. You are not investigators. You are not to go out to do any looking, and you are not to ask people about this matter. You are not to use the internet to look for information about this case or about the law. Above all, you must not talk to anyone who is involved, the lawyers, or the witnesses. Do not be offended if the attorneys or parties do not talk to you. They know that it would be improper to contact you except through the normal jury selection process, and they will generally confine themselves to a brief greeting. Now, during the selection process, your family and friends might be curious as to what you are doing. You may tell them you are on a panel of potential jurors in a criminal case, and that is all you should tell them. Since that is all you should tell family and friends, that is all you should tell the general public. So, during these proceedings, please refrain from using Facebook, Twitter, or other social media to announce that you are a potential juror or to comment on this trial. You may access those social media tools, but please do not publish any information about this case or your thoughts about this case. You do not have to stay away from people and refuse to speak to them. Do whatever you wish, but do not talk about this case, and above all, do not talk at all to anyone involved in it. Now, because of the nature of the charges, this case is receiving media coverage. Do not read about this case in the newspapers or online, and do not listen to news about it on radio or television. Now, this trial, including jury selection, is being televised, but no video of you or any other juror will be taken at any time, now or during trial if you are selected. Also, your name will not be used in the courtroom. You will only be referred to by your random number to protect your privacy. The audio of anything you say will be broadcast, unless we need to discuss something deeply personal or extremely sensitive or embarrassing, and I specifically order the audio not to be broadcast. In that case, the audio will only be heard within this courtroom. In that case, you will still have to answer questions, and they will be on the record, but without any audio or video broadcast whatsoever. So with that, I'm going to return you to the waiting area, except for juror number 27. Juror number 27 can come up to the witness stand, but the other two can go back to the waiting room with the deputy. Sure. Good morning. It's still morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to put my mask back on. If you would like to remove
will automatically end in a few moments. Please press any key to continue the meeting.
What is that? All right. I'm going to take care of that. We had a Zoom hearing earlier this morning, so perhaps it's waiting for us to get back on.
Your meeting will automatically end in a few moments. Please press any key to continue the meeting.
Okay. Kind of threw me there. I will have my mask on. We have plexiglass, and I will try and stay 6 feet away. If you would like to remove your mask, you may do so.
Your meeting will automatically end in a few moments. Please press any key to continue the meeting.
feel like I'm on hold with Microsoft. So in any case, I just wanted to make you comfortable with these COVID restrictions, and I've seen you've removed your mask. Thank you. Everybody just take a short recess here. Okay, let's get back to business. Before I turn the questioning over to the attorneys, what I want to do is swear you in to make sure that all your answers are under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right. I'm going to ask you to pull up to the microphone. Unfortunately, it's not very movable. So,
Okay.
But that's good. I was able to pick up your voice. You filled out a questionnaire, and thank you so much for doing that. That really helps us to explore some topics. And the question I have for you to start with is, was everything true on the questionnaire?
Do I have any other question?
No. Was it everything on the questionnaire true?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have, as you sit here right now, do you have any additions or amendments to it? I only ask because sometimes you fill out the questionnaire months ago, and in reflection you go, could be an opinion changed, or you, on reflection, think that something's inaccurate. It's fine. In fact, it's encouraged that if it's changed or you need to add or subtract something, feel free to volunteer that. As you sit here right now, is there anything at the top of your mind regarding possible changes?
No, but I think one of the things is I fill out the form 3 months ago, and
Right.
I don't even remember what I wrote.
Right.
So yeah.
Don't worry. The lawyers are really good at reminding you about it. So what we're going to do is, as they ask questions, I don't want you to feel like, oh, I think I gave the wrong answer.
Right.
So feel free to say, that's not accurate. You're not going to get in trouble. What we're looking for is just candid, honest, open answers. The questionnaire is just a tool for that. And so your questions or your answers today, feel free to say something different. And they might ask you to explain why. Like, did you forget something, or have your opinions evolved? So feel free to offer any information. Now, you're not supposed to read any articles, and I think the questionnaire said, since you are a potential juror, avoid media about the case, about reading about it.
Okay.
But we recognize that sometimes, despite your best efforts, you might inadvertently be exposed to a headline, or a friend brings up, hey, did you hear about, and then give you some substance about the case. Anything since the time you filled out the questionnaire till today, anything like that happen where you've received more information about the case or the process or procedures, the attorneys, the parties, anything?
Just some information on the news.
Okay. And was it basically, I know there's been a lot on the news about the trial is starting, jury selection is in process.
Correct.
Anything beyond that?
No.
Okay. Now, and we bring that up, and you, in your questionnaire, you noted that you do recall some information from media reports about the case, and that's pretty much universal.
Yeah.
And the question isn't have you heard about the case, but what have you heard, and can you put that aside? Because if you are on the jury, your job is to be fair and impartial above all, but to decide the case only on the evidence in the courtroom and apply the law that I give to you and disregard anything you heard outside the courtroom. And it's also okay if you've formed up various opinions based on what you've heard, but you also have to put those opinions aside. And some people say I can, some people say I can't. And so that's some of the topics we're going to be exploring today.
Okay.
As you sit here right now, do you think you could put aside what you've heard outside the courtroom, any opinions you've formed, and decide the case just on the law and the evidence that you hear in court?
I do.
Okay, thank you. All right, did you recognize anybody on that long list of witnesses?
No.
All Is there anything about the length of the trial that causes you concern?
No.
Okay, you think you could serve, because we're talking about 4 weeks, probably starting March 29th. We don't know how long deliberation goes, that's up to the jury. But you think you could accommodate that?
Correct.
All right, excellent. Anything else you wanted to ask or no before I turn it over to the attorneys?
No.
All right, for juror number 27, Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
I think I can officially say good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for your patience. Sometimes these things take a little bit longer than we anticipate, but I appreciate you being here and for your patience this morning.
Thank you.
All right, so what I'm going to do, sir, is I'm going to ask you a series of kind of general questions about yourself, try to get to know you a little bit, and then I'm going to follow up with some specific questions about some answers you gave in your questionnaire.
Okay.
I understand that you wrote this and answered these questions quite some time ago. No one's trying to trick you. And if you want to you want your recollection to be refreshed, we will certainly do that. Okay?
Okay.
All right. I forgot. So let me ask you this. If you and I were to meet in a social circumstance, party, or some other event, what are a few things you would want me to know about you after that conversation?
After what conversation?
Well, we have a conversation at a party. We meet. We're talking. What do you want me to know about you?
My background.
Background, what you love, what you hate.
What I do.
Yeah.
My hobbies.
Yeah, whatever.
Well, background, I came in the U.S. a little over 14 years ago. Went to school in Nebraska, moved to the state, Minnesota, in 2012, and I'm in IT. I see myself as technologies. So I was laughing when the judge was having issues with Zoom earlier. So I love technology, so I'm in cloud and security and development, and I speak multiple languages. French is another language that I speak, and I'm married. I live with my beautiful wife, and we have a dog. So I love sport, and even though I went to school in Nebraska, I'm a big Gophers fan, and I love the Vikings, and so some of those things that I'll share with you.
Good. And I'm sorry, did you say you have a daughter now?
No, I have a dog.
Oh, dog. I'm sorry. I was wondering because you had answered you had no children, and I heard daughters. Okay. When you first received the notice that you were going to be a juror, or you could potentially be a juror, what was your first reaction to that?
Surprise, and anxious. Obviously, this is time consuming, and obviously this is civic duty also. So yeah, those are some of my first feelings that I had.
Okay. And then I think you subsequently learned that you could potentially be a juror in this case?
Correct.
And how did your feelings change, or what was your feeling when you learned that?
I think the anxiety, obviously the anxiety, went up, but I think in between I had a plan to travel internationally, so I had to cancel my I had to cancel my flight, and I guess that's the only feeling that I had. Nothing really changed.
Okay.
And I also add that the fact that I understand that the case is very something that a lot of people are interested in, and the ability for me to to keep it from my wife, and so those things yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you said your anxiety kind of went up when you learned it was this case. Were you concerned about your personal safety?
No, not at all. It's just, I think it's a big, I think it's a big thing to decide in a case, so just making sure that if you potentially selected, that you make the right, decision.
Okay. So you work, I know you work in like information technology services, and I believe we're trying to keep you as anonymous as we can, so don't say where you work or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I understand you to be in management.
Correct.
How many people do you manage?
8 people.
8
Yeah.
people?
Yeah.
And can you think of a situation in your professional life where you have had to resolve a conflict between 2 of the people that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time. Obviously, before I became a manager, I was an individual contributor myself. So, so the ability to, well, the one thing that happens often with my team personally is my team is, first of all, is globally distributed. So I have few folks in Minneapolis, some other people in other states as well. Conflict always happen, especially with my team when it comes to making a decision about technology or strategy to implement a specific project. Person A or B might have different perspective about how to go about making that decision. Just for instance, we're talking about Zoom, so I'll use that example. Person A might say, well, I wanna use another collaboration tools, and B might be, okay, I love Zoom. So making that decision and ensuring that the team is aligned with whatever decision you make, and making sure that if we decide not to go with person B's opinion, it's nothing personal. I think that's some of those conflicts that I have to deal with. Yeah.
And so, if I kind of to paraphrase what I think, you take a look at the situation. You analyze both people's perspectives. You talk about it, and you then implement the appropriate decision.
Agreed.
Agreed?
Yeah.
And you understand in large part that that's what you would be doing if you were selected as a juror in this case.
I do.
You would have to decide this case with 11 other people, and all 12 of you would have to agree either guilty or not guilty. You understand that?
I do.
And that, have you, in your management experience, have those discussions ever become, or those decision-making processes, have they ever become heated?
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's just natural. Sometimes it comes naturally when people are passionate about the topic. Sometimes it just comes naturally. But I mean, I think for me, it's always important to make sure that my team understand that. Like I said earlier, that it's nothing personal. You can have all this strong opinion about a specific topic, but at the end, we just want the best for my organization, my team, right? So.
Right. Okay. So, in a different context of conflict, right? Can you think of a situation, either professionally or personally, where you've had to decide which person is telling the truth?
Well, I have. When person A come to me and said, this person have said this, and I think for me, I will listen to person A and then talk to person B and put both parties together and try to resolve that conflict, right? And so I think it has happened to me.
Okay. And so, and I understand the attempt to resolve that conflict, but how do you decide which of these people is telling the truth? Right? What tools would you use to determine whether someone is telling the truth about a situation?
I mean, you go with the fact. Go with evidence, I guess. And because sometimes that's the best way to go, right? Because people can say whatever they want, but I think at the end of the day, it's based on fact. If person A say that person B stole my laptop at work, but the laptop was not stolen by person B, then I will talk to both of them, and the fact doesn't support that argument. So,
Okay. So, if you were a juror in this case, for example, you may hear testimony from witnesses about the same event. They're looking at the same event. One person is saying A, and another person is saying B. How
Today,
do
I'm going to be talking to you guys.
Determine which is the more credible explanation.
well, I think I will go with the evidence that support the fact, right? I know maybe I'm talking in a circle here, but it's either black or white, right? Or red or yellow. It's clear. So sometimes the best way to resolve conflict or misunderstanding is to go with what you have in front of you and go with that.
Right. So I think, and maybe let me put it into perspective that you understand, because it's always hard to talk in the hypothetical. Right?
Yeah.
So you work in information technology, and you have a project that you're working on, and there are two software programs potentially that resolve that problem, right? And person number one says, well, I think we should use Zoom, and person number two says, I think we should use Teams, right? But they're both trying to resolve the same problem, right? And so when you have those two circumstances, right, you have two potential resolutions or explanations, how do you analyze which is the best to fit that problem?
So for us in technology, what we do for stuff like that is do a cost analysis, do risk, what kind of benefit or feature these type of technology are bringing to your team, or added value, I should probably say, are bringing to your team. So then you look at both, and compare and see the added value that this technology are bringing to your organization or your business, and you go with the one that that works best for your organization.
Excellent, great, thanks. Now, you were asked a series of questions, or when you first came in here, the judge gave you some basic rules of law that apply in all criminal cases.
Correct.
And you were asked some questions about those rules of law, and if you could follow them in this questionnaire.
Correct.
So one of the questions that I have for you is, would you be able to follow the law even if you think it should be different? If you disagree with the law?
I would.
Okay. So if Judge Cahill were to instruct you, this is the law, even if you disagree with it, do you think that you could follow that instruction?
I'll follow the law, yeah.
So I'm just going to ask you a few questions. It shouldn't take too long about your questionnaire.
Okay.
And again, I'm not trying to trick you, or take things out of context or anything. So you've obviously heard about the facts of this case, right? I mean,
Well, I don't know the fact about the case.
Okay. You've seen the social media video that went viral?
Some of it. I try to stay away from social media really, way before. So some of it, and I would say mainly on TV.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have you ever gone on the internet and watched the video that went viral in its entirety?
What video? There are multiple videos. What video specifically?
Okay. So that's part of what I want to talk about.
Okay.
So there's the video that was taken by a bystander, and it was posted on Facebook or some other social media platform.
I saw that.
Okay. So you went on the internet.
I didn't go on the internet. I think it was somebody showed me it pop up on my, because some of the if you go to, I have Apple News Plus. So some of those things will show you some of those stuff. Yeah, you go and look.
So that,
So I mean, like some of the news feed, like I believe Apple News Plus, give you some of those feed. It's just like CNN and MSNBC or Fox News, and then you can click and see the news of the day. Okay. So that's how I got some of those things.
So that particular video, have you watched that particular video in its entirety?
Well, I only watch, I believe, whatever I got from the news. So I don't know if it was the whole video.
Okay, that's kind of what I'm trying to ask you.
Because I don't know, and yeah.
So that you may have seen parts or snippets or clips of a video, but those were a part of a news or a media story. That's what you're saying? Okay,
yeah,
great.
You got it. Yeah.
But you never, after reading a news story, said, I wonder if there's more to this, and went on the internet and looked for the entire quote-unquote video.
Correct.
Okay. And you obviously knew that this situation became pretty big news nationally, internationally, locally, obviously.
Yes.
And you've had conversations about the case with your friends.
With my wife.
And your wife?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. So the question, you were asked a question, from what you have seen, read, or heard, do you have a general impression of the defendant, in this case, Mr. Chauvin, and you checked somewhat negative, and you wrote, based on the video I saw on TV, but I also understand that I wasn't there and don't know what happened before the event.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And would you stand by that statement today?
I will.
Okay. And so I understand what you're saying in terms of you weren't there, you don't know what happened before, you don't know what happened after. Your opinion is somewhat based on this little bits that you've seen in the news, right?
Correct.
But nevertheless, you had a somewhat negative perception of that. Agreed?
Yeah. Opinion.
Yep. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. And that's okay. You're human. You're going to have an opinion, right? The question is, can you set that opinion aside and focus on the evidence as it's presented in court and make a decision based on that, the information, the evidence, and not your opinion? Can you do that?
Yeah, I think I can do that. I mean, and as you can see, my recollection for that question was, that was so long ago, but that reflects my value because I wasn't there. I saw, and the part of the video that I saw was somewhat negative because of, what transpired on the video. So that's all I have. I don't know any other fact. So that's why I say what negative.
And I appreciate that. And I want to know, because you equivocated a little bit in terms of the question is, can you set aside that opinion? And you said, I think I can. But what we need to hear you say is, I can do that.
I can do that.
Okay.
And I believe I'll be partial. Great.
Partial or impartial?
I'll be impartial.
Yeah, okay. I had to double check. And you said that you had talked about, and I want to ask you about this, have you ever talked about George Floyd's death with your family, friends, or coworkers, or discussed it online? And you checked yes. And you said your wife.
Correct.
Right? And you said, we talked about how it could have been me or anyone else. Can you explain that a little?
I'm sorry, the last part of that sentence?
Sure. We talked about how it could have been me, comma, or anyone else.
I mean, anyone else. Me, human, can be it could be anybody. It could have been you. And so that's what I mean. And for me, I also used to live not far from that area before, when I first met my wife. So that's why I was like, it could have been me. So it could be anybody. So.
Do you have a perception or an opinion of the Minneapolis Police Department, just generally speaking?
I do not.
And do you have any experience with law enforcement officers?
I do not.
You do or do not?
I do not.
Okay, good. In terms of the sort of aftermath and the rioting and protesting, and there's a distinction, I understand, but you say that it asked for your opinion as to whether it was a negative or a positive impact, and you wrote that people in my community understand the protest, but we're not okay with the looting.
Correct.
How do you draw, what's the distinction, and can you just explain that a little bit more?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of my friends understand that, you know, people have the right to protest, but at the same time, people are concerned that, you know, businesses have to shut down. My wife didn't make it to work because she worked in the North Loop area, and the image, you know, my dad called me and was asking if I was okay, you know. So I think that's what I was saying. I mean by that, right? People understand that, yeah, everybody has the right to protest, just like how people protest. I mean, people protest in this country I mean, I don't want to go on and on, but so I understand that the people have to voice their opinion for, you know, how they feel about specific topic, and that's their right. It's just the fact that people, a lot of businesses have to close and things like that. I think that's where I was coming from.
I appreciate that. And again, I completely understand your sentiment. All right.
Yeah.
You were asked a couple of questions about the Black Lives Matter and the Blue Lives Matter. Do you remember those questions generally?
I don't remember what my response was, but yeah, I mean.
Yeah, again, not trying to trick you. And you, with respect to the Black Lives Matter, you checked the box that you viewed them somewhat favorably, and you wrote, I think any lives matter, but black people's lives matter even more since they are marginalized.
Correct.
Okay. And you would agree with that now here today?
Yes.
Okay. And you also, in terms of Blue Lives Matter, found them to be somewhat favorable as well. And you wrote that you believe our cops need to be safe and feel safe to protect our community.
Yeah, but correct.
Okay. And again, you would still stand by that proposition?
I do.
The last two questions I have for you is the last questions that you were asked, do you want to serve as a juror in this case? And you checked the box yes. And why, when they asked you why, you said it is a service to my community and the country.
Correct.
How do you define that? What do you mean by that?
I mean, I think it's a civic duty. I talked about it earlier, and also believe that to make the justice system work, I think we need people that are part of the community to sit as a juror. So,
May I have a moment, Your Honor? Your Honor, we'll pass for cause.
All right, Mr. Sunshos, hold on. Juror 27, I have been pushing these people pretty hard since 8 o'clock in the morning, and so we need a lunch break, and I know that means more delay for you. I apologize. We actually have a lunch waiting for you. So hopefully it'll meet whatever dietary restrictions you might have. But we're going to return you to the other courtroom, and we'll bring you back. Let's go at 1:15. Any objection to that? That gives us about 50 minutes for lunch. All right. At 1:15, we'll come back and get you. Okay? Thank you. We're in recess. Counsel, if I could Counsel, remind me, we'll talk about juror number 98 at the break. Welcome back. So how did we do on our random acts of catering? Was it something that was acceptable or?
Yeah.
Okay. You're
Considering-
being kind, I think.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Slisher, for the state.
All right. Juror number 27, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And they treated you okay at lunch?
They did.
All right. Well, I hope it wasn't so good that you fall asleep during my questioning. I needed to follow up on a couple of responses that you made regarding your prior knowledge of the case. And I think what you indicated was that you saw from the media reports that George Floyd had been arrested and following an exchange with the cops, and he was begging for his life. But you said that you don't know what happened before he was on the ground. And so I'm just wondering, in terms of your, what you're interested in learning, how would, before what happened when George was on the ground, affect your decision in this case?
My opinion, you mean?
Yeah, what are you hoping to learn? What are you hoping to learn about what
Well,
happened?
I'm hoping to learn how he got to the ground, and the one thing also that I heard from the news report was that there were multiple officers around, right? I want to know why there was only one person on him, how many were called, and and why was he arrested? I don't even know why. I think that's another. I think it's important for me to understand the fact that went into his arrest, and how he ended up dying.
Okay. So I also wanted to ask you if you know anyone, if you have a...
Oh, sorry, I'm having trouble here. I think it's
The other one?
Yeah.
Is that better? Okay. Okay. Let's try that. There. Sir, I was wondering if you have any close friends or family members or someone you care about who's ever struggled with illegal drugs.
I do not.
You do not. Do you have any opinions about people who may have used illegal drugs?
I think it's a hard question. I think people use illegal drugs for multiple reasons. Athletes are using it. People use it for recreational purposes. It's legal in some state. So I think, I don't think my opinion matters really, how I feel about it.
And when I'm talking about illegal drugs, maybe I'll even say drugs, not including marijuana, but harder drugs.
Okay.
Do you have any strong opinions one way or the other about the use of illegal drugs?
I know that we all know the impact of opioid, and obviously, it can impact people's life, and mental health is there. So I believe that us as a society, we need to look out for people who are struggling with those. Yeah.
And how would you look out for people who are struggling with the use of illegal drugs? How would you suggest that?
supporting them, caring. I mean, I'll give you one instance. There is one former basketball player. I can't even remember his name. They used to play for the Dallas, the Mavericks, and struggling with drugs addiction. Was found on the street by the owner, supporting him, put him in rehab, and I think those are the support that we should give them.
That's something that you would agree with?
Correct.
Okay. You said in your questionnaire that you believe that the police in your community make you feel safe. Like you said, you strongly agree that the police in your community make you feel safe. Can you tell us why they make you feel safe in your community?
Well, I think in my community, I think when there is a suspicious activity, the police will stop by, they will ask a question, and I think that sense of security is all we want, right? We want to live in a community where we feel safe, and regardless of race, color, and gender, and so. Yeah, I think that's the basic reason why I said that they made me feel safe. Yeah.
Okay. And have you or a close friend or family member within your current community, the community you're living now, have you had to call upon the police in your community to have them?
No.
No? Okay.
But I mean, I will say this. Personally, I have not, but I've seen, at least my neighborhood, I've seen the cops stop by and check up on them and a few times, and so I don't have any reason to believe that my community is unsafe.
Okay.
That's what I should probably say.
Sounds like you live in a pretty safe community.
I mean, for now.
All right. You also stated in the questionnaire that you strongly disagree with the concept of defunding the police. Can you explain that answer a little bit more thoroughly?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of those statements sometimes can be seen political. I mean, I think everybody has their reason, and I believe, in my opinion, that while I necessarily might not agree with the police action in some situation, I believe that in order for me to make for the police to make my community safe, they have to have the right.
They have to have the funds to.
Yeah. So, and I think that I can understand why people say, "Well, defund the police," because they are upset about things that are happening, and I sympathize with that. But at the same time, if we want the police to support our community, that's my opinion. Right? Yeah.
Okay. Do you believe that you would be able to evaluate the testimony of a police officer in the same way you could evaluate testimony of, say, a bystander?
I believe so.
Okay. You would have no reason to favor one person's testimony over the other?
No.
Okay. I'm interested, again, not in the specific location of your job, but just tell me what do you do? What is a day like for you? When they say IT, I have a hard time conceptualizing that.
Yeah, I think earlier we were talking about me being people's manager. So I mean, I would say it's a technical leadership role, right? When I have a team of engineers that report to me, their role is to enable our business and allow them to build application in the cloud securely, and to add value to our customers. And so, as a manager, I make sure that my team is highly performing. They are building solution for the business. They and also making sure that I'm helping them grow personally and professionally. It's not just about them coming to work for me or for the company, but also making sure that, well, their career path also is very important, and we want to see them succeed, whether it's with the current company or moving to another company, and also show empathy to them, right? I think those things are important because people come to work in today's, with COVID and people are working remote. You want to engage with your team and ensure that, well, whether they are going through personal stuff or you want to show some sort of empathy and make sure that you can relate to them. And so my role is not just managing them, but it's also, I always said this to my team, that I'm serving them, right? So I think that's my role.
It sounds like you're working more with people than machines. So when I think of IT, I think of the computers, and I was not understanding so much the technical aspect of your job, because I thought it said that you were in IT security. Is that right?
It's DevOps and cloud and security. So being in IT doesn't mean that I have to be on with computer all the time, but it's about, in my role, it's about creating solution that solve problem, right? So the person who made Zoom, it's not just about being on some computer and creating Zoom, but it's about thinking about what kind of collaboration tool I can provide to people to help them collaborate and be in the courtroom. So that's the type of role that I have. So I have a team of engineers that work for me. We develop application and in the cloud, and enable an R&D, research and development team to build application that not only reside on Prime but also in the cloud, and make sure that these applications are secure. That's where the security part comes in place, right? That include identity access management and security assessment and security audit and all this stuff, and as well as making. So that's the technical side, and the other part is the people's manager side.
I noticed at the time that you answered your questionnaire, you said that you were off social media. Is that right?
I am.
Yeah. And so with your IT and IT security background, I was just wondering if you could tell us why you're not on social media.
It's a personal decision. I mean, I mean, everybody have the right to be on social media or not. I mean, there is a lot of things that are going on social media. I closed my Facebook account. I don't even remember, maybe almost 10 years ago. So I mean, it comes down to me being someone who likes security. I think for me it's more about ensuring that my personal information are secured. I'll give you one example. I closed my Facebook account, like I said, almost 10 years ago, I believe. And there was one day, a couple years ago, I tried to see if I can log back into it. Somebody used my name, have a different picture there, same first name, same last name, same email. That's the reason right there.
I think I understand. If you would give me a moment, Your Honor. One more line of follow-up questions. You'd indicated in your survey that you believe that, or you somewhat agree with the proposition that maybe accounts of police brutality are maybe overstated in the media. You remember answering that question?
I don't remember. Can you give me a recollection?
I'm sorry.
Please?
So the question was whether or not you agree. I think that news reports about police brutality against racial minorities is only the tip of the iceberg. And you indicated that you somewhat disagree with that proposition. Do you recall that?
Well, I don't recall, but well, I'll say this. I think. Can you restate that question again?
Sure. You know, and I think the point of the question is whether or not you have any views that would suggest that that the media exaggerates the amount of police brutality that may be out in society.
I don't believe the media was doing that, but I do believe that sometimes things that we see in the media is that well, people. I remember when when this thing started. There were people from my church, for instance, that were going there, praying, giving food. Those part of that side of it was not showing, was not getting the coverage. So that's what I was trying to say. No,
okay,
yeah.
So it sounds like what you were pointing out is that what you see on the media oftentimes is the bad news and maybe not the good news.
Sometimes, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I have no further questions. I thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
answers and candor today.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. And we would pass for cause.
Juror 27, you will serve on this jury. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is return to this courtroom, or the deputies will escort you to the other courtroom, 9 o'clock on March 29th.
Okay.
Now, having said that, we will probably give you a reminder in case things change as far as timing. But we're pretty confident in that date and time. But we'll give you a reminder in any case. You have a letter with you that got you into the building.
I do.
Please keep that letter. Keep it safe and make sure you. The deputy will collect the yellow lanyard from you when you leave today.
Okay.
You'll be reissued it when you come back.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
No.
Final reminder, you're not an investigator. You're not to read media. Certainly don't watch these proceedings preceding March 29th.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank
You can go with the deputy. Before we wait for the next juror, Juror 98's questionnaire was completely blank. It turns out this is a juror who is over 80 years old. And so the first thing we are going to do is reach out to the juror and see if they wish to exercise their right under the rules, since they are 70 or older, to be excused from jury duty. If they do not exercise that, I'd ask if the parties want to make it easy, or we can bring her in, give her the questionnaire when she comes next time. So let's see what the first answer is, and then we'll go with the second. All right, you can actually come right on up here. Yep, you can put your stuff down there. And take the witness stand right next to me. Perfect. And you are juror number 27, is that, or
I'm
28?
number 28.
28. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for waiting. Process takes a bit, and so we appreciate your patience.
Sure.
Before we do anything else, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath.
Okay.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
Yes.
All right. Let me ask a couple things before I turn it over to the attorneys. Well, first of all, I'm keeping my mask on, and there's plexiglass between us, so if you'd like to remove your mask, it might be easier to hear you, but I leave that to your discretion, however you want to proceed. All right. Well, first of all, is everything on the questionnaire that we sent you? And by the way, thank you for filling it out and getting it back to us.
Yes.
Is there anything? Was everything on that true to begin with?
Everything there should be true.
Okay. Is there anything since you filled out the questionnaire that you thought you should change or add to? Because it's very common that people fill out the questionnaire, some months pass by, and they realize they forgot something or their opinions have changed. Anything like that?
In the questionnaire, I had mentioned with my real estate sales work that I would prefer not to serve on the jury, and I've thought about that more since, and I guess I've changed my thoughts there. I feel more willing to be on the jury and feel that the work would not be an issue.
All right, and you have kind of a time frame. If you are selected for this jury, you'd come back on March 29th. And then the trial itself would take about 4 weeks, and deliberation after that, or as part of the 4 weeks. And you think you can make that work with your work?
Correct. Yes, I do have people who can cover for me.
Okay. Do you think you'd be doing some after-hours work after your jury duty?
Pardon?
Do you think you'd be doing some after-hours work?
I would say it's possible in the evening. There might be phone calls with people who are covering for me.
Okay. Nothing that will keep you up so late that you fall asleep during jury time?
No, nothing like that.
All right, thank you. All right, the lawyers may have some questions that might prompt other things that you want to add to, so feel free to offer that information. We realize it's an evolving situation, so
Sure.
it's not going to get you into trouble if it's different from what's on the questionnaire.
Yep.
All right. Now, you're not supposed to read any articles. That was part of the questionnaire, was tell you to avoid anything on the media or TV, anything like that. We understand, however, that maybe inadvertently you may have seen a headline or seen something on TV briefly. Anything like that that has added to your knowledge about the case?
No, just the headlines. I've tried to avoid beyond the headlines.
Okay.
And the only thing that's probably come up in the headlines is the news about third degree.
Okay. And what do you remember about that? About the substance of what either the headline said or?
That it's something that the perhaps the prosecution would be in favor of, and adding that as an option, and that the defense maybe would not be as in favor. That's my headline impression.
Okay. The important thing is whether it was information before you filled out your questionnaire or information you filled out or after you filled out the questionnaire. Anything you know about the case from outside the courtroom, you have to put aside. You may have some information about this case and formed an opinion about the facts of the case. Got to put that aside. It's all right to have the opinions and to, have seen it. Everybody has seen something. But do you think that, just knowing yourself, do you think you could do that and put aside anything that was outside the courtroom?
Yes, I think I can.
Okay. Do you think basically you can decide this case based on the evidence in the courtroom and the law as I give it to you?
Yes.
I've read some the rules of law already, but you understand at the end when you hear all of the rules of law that must be applied, you have to apply them even if you disagree with them.
I agree. I understand.
All right. So you were given a list of witnesses. Did you recognize anybody on the list?
No, I did not.
All right. Anything else you think we should know about you? Any questions before I turn it over to Mr. Nelson?
No, the only thing to mention, in before, I think the question was asked, do I know anybody in any of the offices for any of the professional people here?
Yes.
And the only contact I thought of back in the room there was a person I worked with in the past in real estate, who I believe works in Mr. Ellison's office.
Okay.
Alex, or Max Kiley.
Who I do not believe has any participation in this case at all. Is that correct, Mr. Ellison?
That's right,
All right. So at most it would be, is there anything about knowing somebody in the Attorney General's office that would have...
Right, no, nothing there, no.
Okay, just want to make sure. I'm glad you brought it up, though.
Yeah.
Very important. All right, with that then, I'm going to turn to Mr. Nelson to inquire. As to juror number 28, you may inquire, Mr. Nelson.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for your patience throughout the course of the day. I'm going to ask you a few questions about yourself generally, try to get to know you a little bit, and then I want to follow up with some questions about your answers in the questionnaire. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me, when you first received your jury summons notice, what was your first reaction or first impression of that?
Well, it just felt that it would be potentially extremely different than any other sort of jury summons. It was understanding it's a major case event like that. So maybe just a little bit nervous, I suppose.
Okay. So did you get a note, like a regular notice first, and then the questionnaire later, or did it all come in one group?
Initially, I got notice last summer for jury duty, and I took the 9-month whatever deferral, and then I was told at that point it would be in March, and the next thing I received, I believe, was a notice that it would be with this particular case.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me break it into two parts. That first notice that caused you to delay, what was your reaction when you got that notice?
Well, to that one, there was very mild reaction, only that I delayed at that point because I felt I was pretty busy with work, and if I had more time, I could plan accordingly like that. So it was just trying to plan a little bit more, my timing like that.
Do you wish you could go back?
I thought about that. It would have been simpler if I had said yes back in August.
All right. So then when you get the notice that you're a prospective juror in this case, that's when you became a little more nervous?
Yes.
And when you use the word nervous, what do you mean? Like, how do you mean?
Well, understanding it's a high-profile case, and anybody who would be on, I guess, feeling a certain amount of maybe pressure of doing the right thing like that.
Okay. So let me ask you a couple of follow-up questions on that. When you talk about pressure, were you concerned for your personal safety or the safety of your family?
No.
Okay.
No.
When you use the term pressure to do the right thing, what does that mean to you?
I think if it's if I had gone into a case perhaps last summer that would not be a high-profile case, then the same expectations and I guess pressure to some extent are there to do the right thing. In a case like this, it's more, I guess, that the decision the jury makes has maybe broader implications, reactions from the general public, and just so it's more that knowing that the general public is paying attention to the decision, and more pressure, I guess, to get it right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of what I think I'm asking you is, what is the right thing, if you had to say? The
right thing would be to follow the instructions that
that the judge has just been speaking of in terms of making the decision based upon the law as it's explained to me in the course of the trial, and have it based upon the evidence provided in the trial, and not on the reactions to images and paper, TV from last spring and summer.
Okay, thanks. So you, can you think of a circumstance in your personal life where you've been called upon to resolve a dispute or a conflict between two people?
Not a real serious conflict. In my work, it's negotiating all the time.
Okay.
With clients on both sides and other colleagues.
I apologize. My phone is off. I don't know why that rang.
I'm glad it wasn't mine.
I apologize very much, Your Honor.
That's okay.
All right. Won't happen again.
So just in my work, but that's the normal sort of negotiating resolution there between parties, and but in terms of I guess in past jobs I've had before my current real estate, in management, where you have issues like that with staff.
Sure.
Nothing quite like that maybe applies to this, but
Well, I mean, it does. Isn't that what this is really about, right? Resolving disputes between
Right,
two
between
parties,
parties.
right?
Yes.
So, how would you approach that situation in past management experience?
It's been quite a while from the management perspective. It's maybe been over 35 years ago,
Okay.
but I think that trying to get both parties to calm down, relax, and to be able to look at the situation from the other party's point of view also, and to be a little bit more objective like that, and empathetic to the other sides to help. But there are two sides to the conflict, and to help with the resolution.
And so, in that circumstance, I mean, just in a hypothetical situation, you've got a problem, right? And one person looks at the problem and says, I think this is the way we should look at it. You've got another person who looks at that very same problem and says something completely different. How do you reconcile those two extremes?
Well, to some extent, you do your best to work with the people, encourage them to step back and be open, discuss, think about it, and then come to a decision. And they may not agree with the decision, they may not see the other person's point of view, but and then make a decision as a manager at that point on what I felt was the right thing to do. And they may not agree with the decision, but try to at least get them to open up their minds, and then again I would be the person who had to make the decision.
Okay.
And
Now,
live with that.
In this context, as you may be aware from the instructions, this will require a unanimous decision of 12 people. In a situation where you've got two sides that aren't agreeing, how would you try to build consensus amongst the group to reach a decision?
I think that to encourage people to follow the instructions of the judge and to the jury, and to try to set aside more their past preconceptions, because it's very possible, at least, that the lack of agreement may be caused by past perceptions, not just the instructions of the judge and attorneys. And so I think I would try to focus on the facts of the case that are presented in the trial, and hopefully that there's still, I understand, even with two people looking at the same presented facts, they'll disagree, but I would just try to focus on the facts presented in the trial and encourage people not to bring in their past impressions that are influencing how they are interpreting the facts.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you. Is there a situation in your personal life that you can think of where you thought you were absolutely 100% right, certain, and then it later turns out you were wrong? Or your professional life? I mean,
yeah. I mean, nothing that jumps out. I mean, I can think of many things where I've made mistakes in the, let's say, in maybe work that I've done and working with clients where I've made mistakes, and then I realize that, and then I own up to it, admit it, and take responsibility when I've made errors, and make sure that the other person is made whole. And I've always done that in my real estate work with clients, and that's the only thing that comes to mind, I guess, when you ask that question.
And that's fair. In terms of owning up to your mistakes, do you think that Mr. Chauvin exercising his right to trial is somehow him saying, I'm not owning up to a mistake?
No, I think it's definitely his right as a citizen, as a person, to have a trial and to present his point of view and his facts.
And so let me ask you that. Mr. Chauvin has no obligation to present a single shred of evidence in this case.
Correct.
He has no obligation to present any witnesses or any evidence. Are you okay with that?
Yes, and that was one thing in my questionnaire that I had made a comment that I did not like. The idea that a defendant would not be forced to testify. I made some comment about that didn't feel quite right to me. But that didn't answer the question. I think the question was I agreeable to that? And yes, I understand that that's the defendant's right, and I accept that, and definitely accept that and agree that that's the law, and could work with that. Okay. So I looked over my questionnaire last night, and I looked at that answer, and I realized that was one that I didn't really answer the question, really.
Okay. And so you actually kept a copy of your questionnaire?
I did.
You may be the first person.
Yeah. I did.
Okay. And you actually reviewed your answers.
Reviewed it.
And so you were prepared to address some of these things.
Reviewed it a little bit, yeah.
Okay. And great. Thank you. Do you have any concerns about COVID-19 or anything like that, seeing how the courtroom is now?
No. I've had my first vaccine. I'll have my second one a week from yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Then I'll be feeling, in the meantime, I do all the protective things.
Okay, great. So speaking of your questionnaire, I'm going to go through. I have some follow-up questions I want to kind of ask you about here. And since you've reviewed it, but if obviously I don't want to misstate anything, and I'm not trying to trick you, I just want to kind of follow through with some questions. So you obviously had a pretty extensive answer about what you had heard about the case prior to filling this out, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, we have to use yes or no.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And some of the things that you wrote, for example, that you believed, or it was your understanding, is the word, that George Floyd and Officer Chauvin had previous contacts. And then in a later sentence you write, in my mind, I am not sure about the past encounter, or in my mind, I have felt that these past encounters may have contributed to the aggressive tactics of Officer Chauvin. Did you get that? Where did you get that information from?
It was either a newspaper article in the Star Tribune or TV news. And that was probably last fairly early on after the incident.
Okay.
And
Yep. And so I'm curious as to the word aggressive tactics. Did you form an opinion about, based on the news and the information you'd received, about the tactics that were used by Officer Chauvin in that instance?
Right. So in my recollection of whatever news story I heard maybe last May or June, that there had been contact between Officer Chauvin at that time and George Floyd, that may have caused their initial contact there the day of the incident to be more aggressive.
Okay.
That there was a little history of, and that's the kind of early on background information that I know that does need to be put out of my mind, because it's not, unless it was presented in a trial, because it also I have no idea how accurate that story even was. That was shortly after the incident, and it may be totally erroneous as far as I know.
Okay. And so I'm just curious, if you didn't hear anything about that in trial, right? Because you said it's one of two things. It could be wrong information, or you may not hear about it in trial. Those are two different concepts. So it could be right, but you may not hear about it in trial. Do you understand that?
Correct. Okay.
And I'm not saying it is or isn't right, but if you have some information that you had learned from the media beforehand, and then you don't hear about it during the course of the trial, are you going to be able to set all of that aside, not bring it up, not talk about it, not remind people about stuff? Or is it going to be nagging in the back of your head and go, I remember reading something beforehand?
I guess that would be part of the media impressions that came on early that I would feel is very important. I feel that I can, do a good job of putting those out of my mind when it comes to the trial, because it's again, following the instructions of the attorneys and the judge, that I feel that I could do that, yes.
Right. Okay. So, we're all human, and we all have opinions, and we all form opinions based on things that we see. Mm-hmm. And it's fair to say that you formed a pretty strong opinion about this matter quite early on, right?
Yeah, from the initial things in the news and just whatever. Yeah, I had seen the images on TV. I had a strong reaction.
Okay. And you testified, or it's not testified, you wrote in your questionnaire that you've seen video of Mr. Floyd's death on the news or internet 6 or more times.
Yeah, and I thought about that in terms of the video. I think what I've seen 6 or more times is the flashing of a particular image of Mr. Chauvin there at the time of the incident. That particular picture has been flashed many times. As far as a video of a little more extended like that, I think maybe it's been 4 or 5 times, or 3 or 4 times where there's been something on the news earlier where it showed a little bit more than just a picture like that. And
okay.
So I would, yeah.
So there's, I guess this may be, we're all sort of presuming this to be like a viral video that
I would say it's just whatever was shown. I don't do anything on social media really, so whatever it was on the network news, local network, or national news, basically. That's all I've seen.
Okay. So, and that's just a follow-up question that I have is, you never saw the news story and then went to the internet, pulled up whatever this original video was?
No.
And whether that was a video from a bystander or some other video that was on these news stories, you never did that.
Correct. Yeah, the only things I saw that were on the network news.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it may be 10 seconds, it may be a still image, it may be a few seconds, it
Yes.
may be longer.
Yes.
But as far as you know, you've never seen the quote-unquote entire video.
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
And I take it you're a fairly regular watcher of the news?
Yeah, I watch the regular nightly national and local news.
Okay. And it's obviously been a very prevalent story in the media for some time, and seen
Right.
it 6 or more times.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So based on that, you were asked a question. From what you have seen, read, or heard, do you have a general impression of the defendant? And you checked the box, very negative. Agreed?
Yes, I did.
Yep. And so based on the news media and conversations with friends and family, you have a very negative view of Officer Chauvin coming into this courtroom today.
Yeah. So I filled the questionnaire out in December, I believe it was, and so the image of Mr. Chauvin there kneeling on top of George Floyd was the impression in the media, and it went on for a length of time, and so that's a negative impression. Yes.
Right, and I'm not.
Yeah, no,
challenging
that's a
that.
very negative impression.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that negative impression would prevent me from, looking at the facts behind the case or of the case. But yeah, that was a
Right.
negative. And I think I made the same comment about the defendant. Or, excuse me, the
Mr. Floyd.
deceased. The deceased. And that's based on the same stories on the national media or the local newspaper, Star Tribune, where they had mentioned other potential brushes with the law.
Okay.
And so that I had sort of a negative impression in terms of that also. I mean, I mentioned both, I guess.
Right. And sir, I don't mean to challenge you.
No, I understand.
Believe it or not, you're not the only person in the world that may have a negative impression of,
Sure.
of my client, and it's okay. But we need to. You're the only person who really knows what's in your heart and in your
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
We have to try to take you at face value, right? And the ultimate question is you follow the news. You have a pretty lengthy recitation of what you remember from the news.
Mm-hmm.
You have a very negative opinion of Mr. Chauvin. You later say that you and your family members advocate for police reform. So your opinions have shaped some decisions you've made, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that's all okay. But in this courtroom, the question really honestly becomes, can you set all of that aside? Can you move all of, and set it, just forget it, basically, and focus only on the evidence in this case?
I believe in terms of making a decision, if I were part of a jury, that I could and would make it based upon the facts presented in the case. It doesn't mean I forgot my impressions. I know that they're there, but it means, I guess, I feel I can put those aside. I can set those aside and follow the instructions that I'm supposed to follow as part of a jury.
Okay. So I mentioned this previously. You indicated that your daughter, son, wife, and yourself have all advocated for police reform. How have you so advocated?
The only person who's done any, my daughter was involved in several of the marches after the incident and after the. So she was in some of the marches. She was the only one of the family member who participated in those. As far as police reform, I think I mentioned in my questionnaire that the one example I mentioned is not police reform. I think it's maybe just more criminal justice reform. And I think I mentioned there that how prisoners are treated in prison. What I've read about that has always bothered me a lot.
Okay.
And I've never been involved in any particular movements for police reform or criminal justice reform, but
So when you say advocated for police reform, are you kind of talking within your social circle or professional circle?
Talking more with friends and family like that.
Right.
And
you mentioned that your daughter has participated in some of the peaceful protests that occurred.
Yes.
Okay. And as a juror, if you were to be a juror in this case, you're not allowed to even tell your daughter that you're involved in this case.
Correct. Yes.
Do you think that you would have pressure? I mean, if all of a sudden Dad is gone for 4 weeks and he's been in jury duty, and maybe your daughter will put together where you're at, right? Do you think that you would face any pressure from your family members to affect your judgment in this case? That would affect your judgment in this case?
No, I think that I would make it very clear. They don't live with me; they live, they have their own homes and everything. But I would make it very clear that I would not be discussing anything to do with the trial with them. Period. During that time frame.
So, can you imagine a scenario where you would sit through the trial, say not guilty? How would you explain that to your parents or to your daughters after the fact?
I would explain that based upon our instructions as jurors and evidence and facts presented at the case, this is how I came to that decision. And it was not based upon the impressions in the newspaper from last May. It was based upon the facts that were presented in the trial. And they'd have to sort of live with that.
Do you think you would disappoint them if you did that?
I would disappoint my daughter, yes. Probably, yes, I'm sure.
Would that weigh on your mind if you were a juror in this case?
No.
Now, you were also asked a series of questions regarding Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. And in context of Black Lives Matter, you say that you believe they are an important voice in calling out prejudices that exist, that devalue black persons. I think they sometimes go too far in their condemnation of power structures and policing that treat them unfairly.
Yes.
Can you explain what you mean in terms of how does Black Lives Matter go too far in their condemnation of power structure?
Well, an example would be maybe being behind the movement to defund the police, and whereas I would say that it's the approach I would be supportive of is reforming, change within, but the whole way of trying to defund, I guess, I do not agree with, and I think that And that would be an example, I guess. If you're going too far, yes.
Sure. And with respect to Blue Lives Matter, you say, I have strong respect for police officers and appreciate very much the service and protection I have received from them. Right. So
Yes, yeah. My own personal experience with law enforcement has always been very positive. Okay. My personal experience.
Now, I understand that after your undergraduate work, you did some seminary work.
Yes.
And ultimately ended up in the real estate business.
Yes, yeah. I went to New York City, and after I graduated from college in Minnesota, and went to seminary there for about 1.5 years, and then decided that was not the path I wanted to continue. So I stayed there and worked doing community outreach work in a neighborhood center there in New York City for another about 3 years, and then moved back to Minnesota.
Gotcha. Now you're, without saying his name,
Pardon?
Without saying his name, I understand that your brother is a retired Minnesota judge.
Yes.
And have you spoken with your brother? Do you maintain a close relationship with your brother?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, he lives here in the Twin Cities, and I have not spoken with him about jury duty, or anything like that, or at all. He does not know I've been called. Okay. And because COVID's covered this whole time, we have not been together since this happened.
So if he's listening right now, is he going to recognize your voice?
If he's listening, I'm sure he would.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question is, obviously you've answered the first part, which is you've not talked to him about your service as a potential juror in this case.
Correct.
Leading into today, right?
I have not spoken at all, yes.
And would it follow to reason that should you be selected as a juror, you're not going to call up your brother and ask him questions about the law or anything to do with this?
Correct, I would not. No.
You understand that Judge Cahill gets to decide what the law of this case is?
Correct.
Similarly, you have a brother-in-law who is a retired medical doctor?
Yes.
And if medical issues were to come up in this case, would you call your brother-in-law and say, can you explain to me what such and such a...
No, I would not. I would not.
And I do have to, I mean, I obviously, and I appreciate the fact that you filled this questionnaire out quite some time ago, 5 months ago or so, or excuse me, 3 months ago. And you've had some time to further reflect on some of your answers, and you raised one of the answers that I wanted to ask you about, which is the defendant's right to remain silent in a trial. Right? You understand that that's a constitutional principle.
Exactly. Yes, I do.
You understand that applies to every criminal defendant?
Yes, yeah.
And you understand that that applies to every United States citizen?
Yes.
And you understand that that applies to people who are even just here visiting?
Or even what?
Are just here visiting?
Yes.
You don't have to be a citizen to invoke the Fifth Amendment.
Yes. Yeah.
And if Mr. Chauvin elected not to testify, do you understand, you could not use that as a sign or an indication of his guilt?
Yes.
But you indicated in your questionnaire that you're not comfortable with that notion.
Well, I didn't answer the question. Now, the question, I forget how the question was, but I didn't read the question very carefully. So I didn't answer the question, and so I just went off on a little bit of a tangent that that over my lifetime, there's something about that's always felt maybe not quite right, but I do understand that there's reasons for it, and it is the law of universal, and I understand that and accept that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just, the question says, under our system of justice, defendants have the right to remain silent, and if they exercise that right, their silence is not to be used against them. Would you have any difficulty following this principle of law?
No.
And so your discomfort is just sort of a more, it's on a different, like, philosophical.
I think it's, yeah, I would say more, right, yes, philosophical.
Are you able to set that aside? I mean, if this is something that you've actually pondered throughout your life, I mean, are you able to actually set that aside and follow the law?
Yes, I am. It's not something I've given, spent a lot of time pondering heavily at all. Nothing like that. It's just that at different times in my life, and it struck me as, I guess it struck me enough that I brought it up in that questionnaire.
Okay. And again, it's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not questioning your reasoning.
Right.
But again, being that we have to sort of take you at your word, right?
Yes.
And it's obvious to me that you have some pretty strong feelings about social justice issues, and that you have some pretty strong feelings about, or opinions, I should say, about this case. And you've thought enough about the Fifth Amendment that you felt you should bring it up in this context, right? Mm-hmm. And I understand you want to be honest, right? You want to say I can follow these rules, but again, when the rubber hits the road, so to speak, can you follow the rules?
I believe I can, yes.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
May. Juror 28, we're going to excuse you from service on this jury. What I'd like you to do is the deputy will ask for your lanyard and the letter you brought in. But I do want to thank you for your time here, both in filling out the questionnaire. Obviously, you put a lot of thought into it, and the questions you answered today. So,
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great. Hold on. So I have that as defense strike number 4. Is that correct? All right.
That's right.
And the other juror we were talking about was a 98. The jury office has made contact with that person, and they are, in fact, either 77, 78 years old, and has elected to withdraw from jury service, as is their right. So you can strike that person from your list as being excused by the jury office. All right, number 29. right, come on up. Good afternoon. You are juror number 29, correct?
Correct.
Well, I'm going to continue to wear a mask, and we have plexiglass between us, so if you're more comfortable, and it might make it easier for the attorneys to hear, you can remove your mask for this time. And before I turn it over to the attorneys, there are just a couple things. First of all, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath, so if you could raise your right hand.